Welcome back, everybody. Deuteronomy 22 states, "But if in the open country a man meets a young woman who is betrothed, and the man seizes her and lies with her, then only the man who lay with her shall die. For this case is like that of a man attacking and murdering his neighbor, because he met her in the open country, and though the betrothed young woman cried for help, there was no one to rescue her." There's no one to hear the woman's cry for help because they're in the open country. They're in an isolated setting. Yet in the event this crime occurs, the death penalty is required. On whose witness? Well, it would be the woman's witness, of course. There's no one there except for her and the man. Let's compare this to the Quran. Why did they not produce for it 4 witnesses? And when they do not produce the witnesses, then it is they, in the sight of Allah, who are the liars. This is why in some Muslim-majority countries, women are in danger if they report rape. Without the required number of witnesses, they are effectively confessing to fornication or adultery, and as such are subject to imprisonment or death. Al-Miserable states, if testimony concerns fornication or sodomy, then it requires 4 male witnesses. And you can see the details that are required. They actually have to see penetration. Let's see how this plays out practically. A 14-year-old girl has accused her father of sexual abuse since the age of 9 and also of rape. So what is her testimony worth? Well, let's check. It is not permissible to accuse the father of rape without evidence. Indeed, the Sharia puts some special conditions for proving zina, fornication or adultery, that are not required in case of other crimes. The crime of zina is not confirmed except if the fornicator admits it, or with the testimony of 4 trustworthy men, while the testimony of women is not accepted. So all a girl in this situation needs to do is simply get her father to confess, or she can hide 4 men in the house and hope that when this criminal act occurs, they are in just the right position to witness the act in all of the explicit detail that they need to count as witnesses. Again, contrast this with Deuteronomy, and with respect to the gender of witnesses in general, Deuteronomy isn't concerned. Only on the evidence of 2 witnesses or of 3 witnesses shall a charge be established. Now, speaking of legal witnesses, it's interesting to see women not only able to act as witnesses, but as judges in the ancient Near East. Here's one of several examples. We have Deborah, and the people of Israel came up to her for judgment. Now, let's fast forward down our timeline and look at the most important event in the Gospels. The synoptics are all quite okay with recording women as witnesses to the resurrection of Jesus. John doesn't even need the testimony of multiple women. For his purposes, he focuses on one woman, Mary Magdalene, and her testimony is good enough for him. And it's interesting when we look at Paul in his letters. In Romans chapter 16, for example, there are several women listed, and many of them are leaders in the church. But someone has to take his letter to the Romans to Rome, right under Caesar's nose, and for that job, he picks a woman. "I commend to you our sister Phoebe. Welcome her in the Lord in a way worthy of the saints." It's even more significant when we consider the very high probability that the bearer of the letter would also be the one who would read the letter aloud and explain it if necessary. Who better to explain it than the one bearing the letter from the Apostle Paul himself? And this was all entrusted by Paul to a woman. It's interesting then when we move farther down our timeline to the 7th century, we find this. "And call upon 2 of your men as witnesses. But if 2 men are not there, then let there be 1 man and 2 women as witnesses from among those acceptable to you." Now, why is it that a woman's testimony isn't worth as much? Let's consult one of Sunni Islam's greatest commentators. Allah requires that 2 women take the place of 1 man as witness because of the woman's shortcomings, as the prophet described. "I have never seen those who have shortcomings in mind and religion controlling those who have sound minds other than you." Here it is from Bukhari. Muhammad said, "Isn't the witness of a woman equal to half of that of a man?" The woman said, "Yes." He said, "This is because of the deficiency of a woman's mind." So my question to Muslims is simply this. What changed from the Bible to the Quran? Why are women suddenly so intellectually deficient? Why is their witness suddenly half as credible as a man's? I've often been asked and wondered myself, what's in Islam for women? They can be beaten. They're regarded as intellectually deficient, and they suffer severe inequality under Sharia law. And to top it all off, the paradise of Allah is perfectly suited to a 7th century barbarian like Muhammad who wanted women for all of the wrong reasons and in all of the wrong ways. Allah's paradise is perfect for one of Muhammad's companions who was so filled with lust that they walked around with reproductive fluid dribbling from their reproductive organs. By the way, I'm so thankful that Jabir moved his hand while saying so. Otherwise, we wouldn't have a clue what he was talking about. Sounds like a real sharp fellow, doesn't he? But back to Allah's paradise. It's all for men. There are large-breasted maidens, and they're of the same age. They're also confined in tents. From this life to the afterlife, what's in it for women? Well, in Muslim-majority countries, women really don't have a choice. But with respect to the afterlife, to Allah's paradise, their concerns are actually upstream of that. They're not so much concerned about how they'll be treated in paradise. They're concerned about whether or not they'll make it there at all. Hadith that talk about women's inferior intellect or describe women as being the majority in hell actually mean something to modern Muslim women. They're more than just effective polemics that people like me use to expose the world's most obvious false prophet. They're a source of a lifetime of insecurity for Muslim women because they're following a God who they believe sees them as deficient and as such may not grant them entry into paradise. This is all more proof that the Quran and the Hadith and all of this nonsense is nothing but a product of its own place and time, and it's bound by the limits of the intellectually deficient, misogynistic men who produced it. I'll see you next time.